The last embers of sunlight danced across the rooftop terrace as Eveline pressed her silk scarf into Tristan's hand. Golden hues framed her face, lips trembling, eyes glinting with unshed tears, while the city below hummed with the promise of night. "Keep it," she whispered, voice fragile as the threadbare fabric. "Until I return." His fingers closed over the scarf, warmth spreading through him, matching the sudden ache in his chest. She turned away, pale light spilling over her silhouette like a benediction, and walked down the spiral stairs without a backward glance. Tristan stood frozen, heart hammering. The scarf, soft, iridescent, stitched with tiny blooms, felt impossibly intimate against his palm. In that moment, the terrace seemed too wide, the sky too empty, and every memory of her laughter echoed in the cool air. He slipped the scarf around his neck, tied it loosely, and vowed silently to guard it until the day she chose to come back. But as the city lights flickered on, shadows crept across his thoughts. Was her promise forged by hope or desperation? And what did she truly expect him to do with a simple piece of cloth against a future neither of them could foresee? Tristan tucked the scarf beneath his coat collar and descended into the pulse of the city. Rain threatened on the horizon, fat clouds rumbling like distant thunder. He navigated crowded streets, still haunted by Eveline's hollow glance. Every passerby became a potential messenger. Could she be behind that cafe window, waiting? Had she slipped away already? Doubt gnawed at him. Flashback. 2 months earlier, they'd met at an art opening in the old warehouse district. Eveline, a painter with cerulean hair and a laugh like wind chimes, had captivated him instantly. They shared confidences beneath skylights dripping with rain. Her world was color and chaos, his was measured and safe. Yet their differences had drawn them together. When she gifted him the scarf, she spoke of its journey. Handwoven by her grandmother in a forgotten mountain village, meant to carry love through hardship. Now, as he entered the subway station, a man brushing past snagged the scarf's edge. Tristan steadied the fabric, his heart leaping. He glanced back, but nothing, only strangers in motion, indifferent. At his apartment, he found a letter slipped under his door. The envelope bore Eveline's delicate script. Hands shaking, he tore it open. Inside, no tidy explanation, only fragments. "Don't search for me in familiar places. I need time to paint truth beyond my fears. I love you, Tris, but I cannot stay. Forgive me." His breath hitched. She wasn't gone because of him, yet every word felt like a blade. Left alone, he pressed the scarf to his cheek, inhaling her scent, rain, clay, wonder. A single tear fell onto the silk. He paced the small living room. Outside, thunder rattled windows. He realized this was no romantic disappearance, but an invitation to uncertainty. Was her absence a test, a retreat? He clenched his fists. He would chase her if he had to, through every storm, across every doubt. But first, he needed to find a clue. He rifled through her paintings, strewn across his art shelf, searching for hidden signposts. One canvas caught his eye. A twilight cityscape, not of this skyline but another, clustered spires under violet skies. Beneath it, barely visible, a single word scrawled in gold leaf. Marseille, Marseille, port city of wind and salt and light. Tracing Eveline's artistic soul toward that distant harbor, Tristan understood his path. He would follow her there, scarf in hand, and confront the emptiness she'd left behind. With trembling resolve, he packed a small bag. Jeans, a journal, essentials, and tucked the scarf into his coat. Tomorrow, he would board the earliest train. Tonight, he would whisper to the empty room that he would not let her go. Tristan spent the rest of the evening staring at the map pinned to his wall. Every evening train line to Marseille was circled in red ink, every possible route marked with sticky notes. Change in Avignon. Direct TGV at 6:15 a.m. Book seat in advance. His room, once orderly, had become a war room for a search he barely understood. Outside, rain pattered against the window pane, each drop echoing the thrum of his anxious heart. At midnight, he finally climbed into bed, clutching the scarf like a talisman. Sleep eluded him. He dreamed of Eveline standing on a windswept quay, the scarf snapping around her neck like a banner in the wind. She turned and whispered, "Don't come," before the sea swallowed her whole. He woke gasping, sweat-soaked and alone. Morning broke with a gray sky. Coffee tasted bitter on his tongue as he threw the last essentials into his bag: a leather-bound journal, his phone charger, and a small travel guide to Provence. Before leaving, he pressed the scarf to his lips, murmuring, "I'm coming, Eveline. I'll find you." The station was a blur of steel and motion. Tristan felt his pulse accelerate with every announcement over the loudspeaker. He located his platform, track 4, and settled by the window. The train hissed to life, and with a gentle lurch, the city he knew slipped away beneath a veil of drizzle. As fields of green and gold unfurled beyond the glass, Tristan's mind churned. He recalled the first time Eveline had shown him her studio, a sunlit loft where paint-splattered stools surrounded a battered easel. She'd laughed as she described her dreams of capturing the ineffable. "The taste of rain on marble," she'd said. He'd teased her for being poetic, but secretly envied her ability to find magic in minutiae. Now magic felt dangerously scarce without her. Midway through the journey, the train stopped at Avignon. Tristan stepped onto the platform, the wind whipping his hair. He removed the scarf and tightened it around his neck, a shield against the chill. A squall swept in, and droplets danced across the concrete. He imagined Eveline standing here first, sketchbook in hand, eyes roving for inspiration. If he could trace her footsteps, perhaps in this ancient city he'd find another clue. But Avignon held only tourists and vendors hawking postcards. He slipped into a cafe for shelter, ordering a café crème. The barista, a young woman with a Parisian accent, noticed the scarf's intricate floral pattern. "Beautiful," she said, sliding the cup across the counter. "Handmade?" Tristan nodded, offering a weary smile. She apologized, but had she seen a woman matching the description, a blue-haired painter roaming the streets? The barista shook her head but pressed a pastry into his hand on the house, she said kindly. "Good luck." Tristan stepped back into the rain, clutching the pastry and his hope. He snapped a photo of the cafe's facade and jotted a note in his journal. "No sign of her, but kindness exists. Keep going." The act of writing steadied him. Each line was a promise not to give up. He returned to the train and watched the countryside slide by olive groves, vineyards stretching toward distant hills, clusters of stone villages perched like sentinels. With every mile, his confidence grew. Yet doubt lingered. What if she never meant for him to follow? What if the scarf was not a bond but a burden? At Marseille's St. Charles station, the city's cacophony hit him like a wave. Horns honked, vendors shouted, and seagulls cried overhead. He disembarked, lungs filling with the tang of salt and diesel. Stepping onto the platform, he felt the scarf tighten around his throat, an anchor and a question all at once. He navigated through the crowd toward the exit, scanning faces. He caught sight of the old port beyond the station's arched windows. Fishing boats bobbing in the harbor, cranes silhouetted against the low sky. That was Eveline's world now, the open sea, the salt-sweet air. If the painting's spires hinted at Marseille's Notre Dame de la Garde, then perhaps she sought the solitude atop that hill. Dragging his bag behind him, Tristan emerged into the drizzle and hailed a taxi. He instructed the driver to take him to the hill, the basilica rising like a watchtower above the city. The winding road clawed upward. Tristan stared out at the patchwork rooftops, imagining Eveline perched on a ledge, brush in hand, capturing the panorama. When the taxi stopped, he paid and climbed the final steps on foot, each stone slick with rain. The air was thinner here, brighter, tinged with possibility. He wrapped the scarf tighter, its silk pressing warmth against his chest. At the summit, where tourists now clustered under umbrellas, he paused, casting his eyes over the vista. Heart pounding, he searched the crowd for a flash of cerulean hair. But there was nothing, only strangers huddled against the mist. The basilica's bells told the hour, their echoes rolling across the harbor. Tristan exhaled sharply. This was his first real confrontation with the unknown. He stood at the precipice between what he knew, her absence, the promise of the scarf, and what he sought: Eveline's return. With a trembling hand, he wrote a new entry in his journal. "I am here. I will not stop until I find you or until you come back on your own. This scarf is my oath." He folded the journal, slung his bag over his shoulder, and stepped away from the railing, ready to descend into the city streets in search of whatever clue awaited him. The journey had only just begun, and with it, the true test of his devotion. For the next 3 days, Tristan wove himself into the rhythm of Marseille. Each morning, he wound his scarf around his neck before stepping into the city's bustle, its clamoring tramcars, the rattle of shutters opening, fishermen untying nets at dawn. The scarf, imbued with Eveline's scent of rain and oil paint, became his compass. He refused to wash it, believing every droplet of salt or stain of coffee to be an imprint of her journey. Day 1, the Via Port and the gallery. He began at the Via Port, where the harbor's murmur mingled with gull cries. Street artists displayed watercolors of limestone facades, and cafe tables spilled onto cobblestones. Tristan approached an elderly painter stationed beneath a striped awning, an expatriate from Toulouse, whose name badge read Henry. He studied the man's loose sketches, keen for recognition. "You're a painter," Tristan said in halting French. "Perhaps you've seen someone like her." Henry's eyes crinkled. "Blue hair, slender brush in hand," he murmured, recalling the young woman who'd asked him directions to a sequestered atelier near the Painier district. "She came 2 days ago, said she needed quiet to paint the peeling colors of the old quarter." He pointed along a narrow stairway alley. "Try Rue du Petit Puits. But mind the cats, they roam between the stones." Heart-pounding, Tristan followed the alley's uneven steps. Shadows pooled beneath clotheslines strung overhead. Stray cats slunk in and out of doorways decorated with cracked frescoes. A single window boasted a makeshift studio. Canvases leaned against chipped walls, vials of turpentine and slender brushes perched like soldiers on a windowsill. Inside, a half-finished painting depicted a woman's hand releasing a scarf into the wind, an uncanny echo of Tristan's own story. He tapped the glass. Inside, a slender figure turned. But it was not Eveline, but a young assistant with dark curls. "Monsieur, may I help you?" she asked in accented English. When Tristan showed her the scarf, her expression flickered. "She left early this morning. Took only her paints and that scarf." She hesitated, then added, "She said she was meeting someone at the Basilica, someone who understood her art." Tristan's pulse raced. "Did you ask who?" She shook her head. She refused to say. "But I found this by the easel." She slipped Tristan a small bundle, a leather-bound notebook, water-stained at the edges, pages covered in Eveline's loopy script and thumbnail sketches of a crumbling lighthouse framed by storm clouds. Clutching the notebook, Tristan descended back toward the port, each step heavier with anticipation. Inside, Eveline's journal spoke of a lighthouse at Cap Canaille, an outcrop of cliffs south of Cassis. "I must confront what lies beneath the waves, even if it means facing the heart of my fear. I will wait at Cap Canaille, where sea and sky collide." The note was both invitation and challenge. He would have to venture beyond Marseille into the rugged coastline. At dawn, Tristan caught the coastal bus from La Joliette. The narrow road hugged white cliffs that plunged into turquoise sea. Each hairpin turn pressed the scarf tighter against his throat, as if urging him onward. The sun rose behind him, gilding the water's surface in molten gold. He arrived in Cassis, a seaside village of pastel houses and sloping streets. Tourists clustered in cafes sipping pastis. Fishermen mended nets in the shadow of the citadel. Tristan showed the notebook to an innkeeper, Madame Fournier, a robust woman with a laugh that echoed off the harbor walls. She read Eveline's entry and nodded. "Yes, she spoke of Cap Canaille," she said, pointing to a narrow footpath winding upward. "She asked for solitude, but worry not. The view will steal your breath, not your solitude." Armed with a small backpack and the scarf's comfort around his neck, Tristan climbed the path. The trail was steep, the stones unstable. Sweat stung his eyes, and his calves burned, but his resolve solidified with each step. Halfway up, he paused by a crag where wild thyme grew in purple clusters. He pressed the scarf into his journal, capturing the faint aroma of Provence mingled with salt spray. At the summit, the cliff's edge yawned before him, a vertiginous drop to roiling water hundreds of feet below. The wind snapped at his hair, and the scarf snapped in his hands. He spread his arms, envisioning Eveline there, paintbrush poised to capture the thunderous meeting of sea and sky. He called her name into the wind. His voice was swallowed by the roar. He retraced his steps to find a sheltered alcove where the lighthouse's outline emerged in the distance, a white tower perched precariously. Though the pages described Cap Canaille's ancient guardian, he saw no path leading to it. With trembling heart, he took out his phone to check the notebook's sketches, a hidden switchback concealed by undergrowth. He ventured off-trail, slipping through thorny brambles that snagged his coat. At last, he arrived at the ruins of a small stone watchpost. The tower was gone, collapsed centuries ago, yet the milestone stones engraved with cryptic symbols remained. Eveline had copied them faithfully. He matched each rune on the notebook with the stones. At the base, he discovered a shallow cavity where she had hidden a folded note, sealed with a smudge of paint. He unfolded it. Only those willing to face the storm may witness true clarity. Wait for midnight. The full moon will cast a path upon the waves. I will meet you then, or never. A damp chill crept up Tristan's spine. Midnight on Cap Canaille. The challenge was clear. He had to choose between turning back to safety or braving the cliffs in darkness, drawn by Eveline's vision. Tristan checked into a small guest house at the cliff's base, refusing Madame Fournier's bed linens until he could place the scarf upon his pillow each night. As dusk approached, he packed a headlamp, the notebook, and a flask of strong coffee. At 10 p.m., he set out under a waning moon. The path stretched like a pale ribbon up the cliffs. The night wind swirled with the scent of brine and wild rosemary. Donning the scarf once more, he climbed. The headlamp's beam cut through the blackness, revealing jagged stones and sudden chasms. Fear tugged at him, but he pressed on, heart pounding with equal measures of dread and hope. Each footfall echoed in his ears, competing with the distant crash of waves. At a ledge 3/4 of the way up, he paused. The moon broke through a bank of clouds, casting a silver trail across the water. It aligned perfectly with the notebook's sketch, a narrow beam pointing toward a jutting rock in the sea, a beacon, Eveline had written, of unspoken truths. Tristan crouched at the cliff's edge, scanning the rock with his lamp. There, barely visible, was a small figure, Eveline. She stood motionless, her cerulean hair trailing down her back, a coat wrapped tightly around her shoulders. In her hand, she held the scarf, now wet and frayed at the ends. Her eyes, when they met his, glowed like lanterns in the dark. "Tris," she whispered, voice carried by the wind. "You came." Relief and something sharper, anger, perhaps, flickered across her face. "Why?" He climbed down to the stone jetty below, waves nipping at his boots. When he reached her, she turned, the moonlight revealing streaks of tears on her cheeks. "I had to see if you would," she said. "If the world you claim to love could be as wild and uncharted as mine." She held out the scarf. "I wanted proof you'd hold on when everything else fell away." Tristan swallowed. "I would follow you anywhere, Eveline. Through storms, through cliffs, through the darkest night." He took her hand, the fabric of the scarf damp against his palm. She studied him, the wind tousling her hair. "We paint our lives with our choices," she said. "Tonight you chose art over comfort. You chose me over fear." As moonbeams danced upon the waves, Tristan wrapped the scarf around Eveline's shoulders. She leaned into him, head resting against his chest. The storm raged around them, spray blasting against the rocks, but inside his arms, she found a stillness. In the days that followed, Tristan and Eveline navigated the fragile truce between love and independence. She led him through her world of light and shadow. Secret galleries hidden beneath viaducts, midnight sketch sessions beneath olive trees, impromptu exhibits in abandoned warehouses. Tristan's certainty wavered each time she spoke of the call of the unknown, her hunger for freedom, her fear of settling. One afternoon, in a dilapidated factory repurposed as an art commune, Eveline produced a blank canvas. "Paint," she challenged him, stepping back. Tristan hesitated. His hands had never held a brush in earnest. She guided his hand, mixing pigments into muted blues and grays. His strokes were hesitant, yet each mark felt truthful. Eveline watched with an inscrutable smile. When he stepped back, he saw the painting, a lone figure standing at the cliff's edge, scarf billowing into the wind. "It's beautiful," she whispered. He glanced at her scarf, now draped around her studio window like a banner. "It's yours," he said, "not mine." Her eyes glistened. "Art reflects sacrifice, but only if you dare to give yourself away." The commune pulsated with artists, some drawn by Eveline's renown, others chasing an undefinable spark. Among them was Mark, a sculptor whose humor masked a jealous intensity. He'd watched Tristan's devotion with narrowed eyes. At dusk, Mark cornered Tristan by an old lathe. "You really think you can tame her spirit? She'll leave one day just like she left me." His voice was low and threatening. Tristan met Mark's gaze. "I don't want to tame her, I want to stand beside her. And if she ever wants to go, then I'll set her free." Mark sneered, but his challenge only steeled Tristan's resolve. He visited the cliffs again, alone, rediscovering the thrill of risk that Eveline chased. He realized that loving her meant embracing uncertainty, letting their shared story unfold on canvases they painted together. By the end of this week, Tristan's journey through Marseille's alleys, capricious markets, and wind-blown coast had reshaped him. He'd faced storms both literal and emotional, deepened his understanding of Eveline's restless soul, and confronted his own capacity for sacrifice. Yet the greatest test still loomed. Whether love born of promise and scarf-wrapped pledges could withstand the roar of an untamed heart. As twilight fell once more, Tristan stood on the dock where they had first reunited, the city's lights winking across the harbor. He held Eveline's wrist, gently tracing the braid of her hair, now threaded with salt and sunlight. She turned to him, a question in her sapphire gaze. He raised the scarf between them, its silk translucent in the lamplight. "This belongs to both of us," he said softly. "If we walk forward together, it will carry our story, scarred, yes, but stronger for it." With a breath that mingled hope and fear, Eveline tied the scarf around them both, two ends knotted in a promise of shared destiny. The night air hummed with possibility. The rising action had tested their convictions, deepened their bond, and set the stage for the climactic confrontation. The moment when Eveline's deepest fears and Tristan's unwavering love would collide, and only one path would remain. Moonlight glittered off the water as Tristan and Eveline stood on the creaking dock, the scarf knotted between them, fluttering like a living thing. Yet beneath the serenity, tension coiled tighter than a spring. Eveline's sapphire eyes reflected the harbor lights, but something in her posture spoke of retreat, shoulders hunched, gaze shifting to the dark horizon. Tristan sensed the moment cracking. "Eveline," he began gently, "we've crossed cliffs and storms together. We faced midnight's chill. Why does the daylight feel colder now?" She looked away, voice low. "I painted freedom and you chased me. But can you truly share the endless unknown? Or will you cling to what you think you want?" His heart thundered. This was the truth she guarded, not whether he loved her, but whether he could let her be herself. He released one end of the scarf and wrapped it around his wrist, binding himself to her both literally and metaphorically. "I don't want to cage you," he said. "I want to breathe the same air, see what you see, even if it's terrifying." She closed her eyes, breath catching in her throat. The wind tugged at her hair, the scarf, and her resolve. When she spoke, her voice trembled. "What if one day I wake up and the wind calls me elsewhere? What then?" Tristan stepped closer, his free hand brushing a stray lock of blue from her face. "Then I will release you," he vowed. "But tonight, I choose to stand with you in light and in shadow." Tears welled in Eveline's eyes. The harbor's lullaby, waves lapping, distant horns, seemed to hush for her answer. She lifted her hand, the scarf taut between her fingers and his. With deliberate slowness, she untied the knot. Panic flared in Tristan's chest, the symbol of their unity unraveled. He opened his mouth to protest, but she held up a finger. "No," she whispered fiercely. "This is not how we bind ourselves." She took both ends of the scarf. Wrapping it gently around Tristan's neck, she tied a single loose knot. Then she wound the remaining length around her own wrist and tied another small knot. Tristan's breath hitched. I love you," Eveline said, voice breaking. "But love is not a rope that suffocates. It's two wandering souls choosing to tie themselves together, even as the wind tugs at their edges." She slid her knot free, letting the scarf rest unknotted between them, a bridge rather than a chain. In that suspended moment, the harbor lights shimmered like a million painted strokes. Tristan touched his knot, then traced Eveline's as she ran her fingertips along his wrist. Their silent pact hung in the air, delicate, flexible, real. Then, as if the universe exhaled, the wind shifted. A spray of salt water hit their faces. Seagulls cried overhead. Eveline clutched Tristan's hand and pulled him toward the end of the dock. Together, they stepped onto the small fishing boat moored there, an unplanned vessel for their shared voyage. The boat rocked beneath their weight, but Eveline steadied it, smiling through tears. "Let's paint this night," she said. Together, Tristan moved beside her, heart soaring. He reached into his pocket and withdrew the leather-bound notebook, Eveline's chronicle of fears and dreams. "Our next canvas," he said, tapping the cover. "Blank, but ours to fill." Eveline nodded. She unfolded the scarf and draped it across the boat's prow, letting its ends flutter like pennants. "A banner of hope," she murmured. As the boat drifted from the dock lights receded and the full moon found its mirror on the water's surface. In that luminous corridor, they sat side by side, scarf between them, notebook in Eveline's lap, Tristan's arm around her shoulders, and looked to the horizon. No promises of permanence, no binding knots, only the vast unknown, bright with possibility. And in their intertwined silence, they embraced the truth that love, like art, is an act of fearless creation. Tonight, they had both chosen daring over comfort. And with the scarf billowing ahead, they let the currents carry them toward whatever awaited beyond the harbor's edge. The dawn that followed their moonlit voyage arrived gently over the harbor, painting the sky in rose and lavender. Tristan and Eveline awoke aboard the small fishing boat, its modest cabin redolent of salt and wood. The scarf, still damp from the night's spray, hung across a cleat at the prow like a banner of their shared victory. Outside, the sea lay calm, rippling softly beneath the pastel sky. Eveline stretched, then glanced at Tristan, who was stoking a portable burner for coffee. She hesitated, uncertain how to bridge the fragile peace they'd forged. The events of the night, tensions snapped, knots untied, two hearts committing without ensnaring, felt too transient for daylight scrutiny. Tristan handed her a steaming cup. "To new canvases," he said softly. She smiled, raising her cup in a grateful toast. They spent the morning drifting through the port, tracing the paths of their past days. The narrow alleys of Le Panier, the crumbling watch post on Cap Canaille, the market stalls of Cassis. With each familiar landmark, they shared reflections, Eveline recounting why she'd hidden at the atelier, why she'd challenged Tristan to prove his devotion. Tristan admitting his fears of losing her even as he chased her across Provence. Their confessions were honest and unguarded, weaving a tapestry of intimacy stronger than any knot. By midday, they reached the quayside again, where Madame Fournier's guest house rose above the harbor. Eveline turned to Tristan. "I want to paint today," she declared, "but not alone." Her gaze flicked to the scarf. "Will you sit for me?" He raised an eyebrow in mock surprise. "You want to paint me? Only because you've given me more inspiration than any wind or wave ever could." They climbed the stairs to her former room-turned studio. Canvases lined the walls, storm-lashed cliffs, harbor lights, a lone figure by moonlight. In the center stood a fresh easel with a blank canvas. Eveline unpacked brushes and tubes of paint, her movements sure and graceful. Tristan removed the scarf and draped it over his shoulders to mimic how she'd first given it to him, lightly, with an air of farewell. He settled onto a stool, heart fluttering as Eveline began speaking in soft tones. "Hold still." "Good. I'm capturing not just your likeness, but this moment, this calm after the storm." With each brushstroke, the tension between them dissolved further. The canvas blossomed into a portrait. Tristan against a twilight sky, the scarf softly draped about his neck, his eyes reflecting both steadiness and warmth. As she painted, Tristan watched her transform paint to emotion, line to longing. He realized that her art was an outward expression of her inner landscape, unceasing, ever-changing, yet always seeking truth. And now, for the first time, she was painting alongside him rather than ahead of him. When Eveline finally stepped back, cheeks flushed, Tristan rose and approached the canvas. The likeness was uncanny, not a mere image but a living presence. He reached out, fingers brushing paint, and she caught his hand. "It's beautiful," he whispered, voice thick. "But it's not complete." She tilted her head. "Why?" He lifted the scarf from his shoulders and laid it across the painted figure's neck, aligning it with the brushstrokes. Almost instinctively, she loaded her brush with scarlet and added a final stroke. a tiny knot, loose yet secure. Their eyes met. The painting, once a solitary study, had become a shared masterpiece, proof that two visions could merge without sacrificing freedom. Over the next week, Tristan and Eveline settled into a new rhythm. They explored Marseille together, riding the funicular to the Basilica, strolling through leafy promenades, lingering over bouillabaisse in sunlit cafes. Yet even in these ordinary moments, the memory of their midnight reckoning lingered, reminding them that love required both courage and compromise. One afternoon, Eveline received a letter from a Parisian gallery expressing interest in one of her lighthouse sketches. The opportunity was prestige and possibility, a solo exhibition in the city she once dreamed as her ultimate stage. Her eyes sparkled at the prospect, but uncertainty clouded her smile. Tristan felt his chest tighten. Paris was farther, a world of deadlines, critics, and rigid expectations, everything Eveline had fled when he first met her. He recognized the conflict flickering in her gaze, the lure of recognition versus the safety of their shared haven. That evening, they sat on the quay at sunset, the scarf tying them together on a low post. Eveline broke the silence. "I want to accept, but I'm terrified. What if Paris changes me? What if I become someone you can't follow?" Tristan took her hand. "I won't pretend it'll be easy, but I promise to stand by you wherever you choose to go." His voice was steady, unwavering. "And if you need space to create, I will step back, but I will always return to you." Tears glistened in her eyes as she tied the scarf around Tristan's wrist and looped it loosely around her own, each knot a silent vow. "Then let's go to Paris," she said, voice small but determined. 2 days later, as the train to Paris thundered through Provence, Tristan and Eveline sat side by side, the scarf folded neatly between them. She reviewed her sketches and portfolio. He scribbled in his own journal, plans for a life that blended love with adventure, art with partnership. When the train emerged onto the plains of the Rhône, golden fields flickering past, Eveline reached for Tristan's hand. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing in us." He squeezed her fingers. "Always." In Paris, they plunged into a whirlwind of gallery openings and artistic soirees. Eveline's work was hailed for its raw emotion. Tristan found work assisting at a local publishing house, leveraging his own writing talent to support their life together. They rented a small attic apartment in Montmartre, where skylights framed rooftops and church spires, reminders of the vistas Eveline had once painted alone. Though Paris pulsed with ambition and critique, the scarf remained their talisman. They tied it to the balcony railing, letting it flutter in the breeze, an emblem of their shared story. In moments of pressure, an art critic's harsh review, a late-night deadline, Tristan would glance at the scarf and remember the cliffs of Cap Canaille, the midnight path across the harbor, and Eveline's quiet courage. Eveline, in turn, would run her fingers along its threads, recalling Tristan's vow at sunrise on the fishing boat. Months later, at the opening night of Eveline's Parisian exhibition, the gallery buzzed with patrons admiring her coastal series, paintings of lighthouses, storm clouds, and lone figures beneath vast skies. In the center hung the portrait she'd painted of Tristan, scarf knotted gently around his neck. The scarf itself was displayed in a glass case nearby, its silk slightly faded but the colors still vibrant. As Eveline addressed the crowd, she spoke of art as a mirror of the soul, and of the journey that had led her here. She acknowledged Tristan, seated in the front row, his expression proud and tender. When the applause died down, she crossed to him and placed a single brush dipped in gold onto his palm, a gift of shared artistry. He stood, draping the scarf around her shoulders in turn, as on the fishing boat that fateful night. Their eyes met, and in that instant, every trial, every storm, every doubt was crystallized into a moment of triumph. They descended the gallery steps into the Parisian night, arms entwined, the scarf trailing between them like a ribbon of memory. The Seine shimmered nearby, bridges arched like silent witnesses to their journey. No longer did either fear the unknown. Together, they were ready to chart new courses, guided by trust and the knowledge that love, like art, was a living, evolving creation. Tristan and Eveline's story did not end with a single resolution, but rather transformed into an ongoing collaboration of life and art interwoven. The scarf, once a symbol of promise, had become a testament to their willingness to trust and to let go. Their love had been tested by distance, by fear, and by the lure of freedom, yet each trial deepened rather than diminished their bond. As they walked along the Seine, Eveline sketched the Pont Neuf bathed in lamplight. Tristan dictated his next chapter into a small recorder. The city pulsed around them, brushes and pens poised to capture its brilliance. And above it all, the scarf, hung from their apartment's balcony, fluttered in the breeze, a silent reminder that their masterpiece was still unfolding. The world lay before them, vast, unpredictable, and beautiful. They faced it side by side, two souls bound not by knots that strangled, but by the loose threads of trust, adventure, and the unbreakable promise to return. At dawn in their Montmartre attic, Eveline awoke to the soft chime of church bells. Sunlight filtered through the skylight, illuminating the scarf draped across their windowsill, its silk threads now woven into the fabric of their shared life. She turned to find Tristan already awake, pen in hand, as he drafted a letter describing their journey. He set aside his journal and reached for her hand. Together, they held the scarf between them, its ends lightly knotted around each wrist. Neither spoke. The morning light said everything words could not. Eveline closed her eyes and breathed in the quiet warmth of their home, once a dream of independence, now a haven of mutual strength. Tristan, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat beneath his palm, realized that every risk he'd taken, every mile he'd traveled, had led them here. In that serene moment, they both understood that their love was neither tether nor tetherless, but a living tapestry of trust, freedom, and devotion. As the bells faded, Eveline reached up and kissed Tristan's knuckles, where the scarf's knot lay. They rose together, ready to greet the day, aware that, whatever horizons awaited them, they would face them side by side, bound by choice and carried onward by the enduring promise of the scarf.